Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Trainman, and welcome back to episode... Oh, I'm supposed to do the different intro. This is episode 215 of the Zombie Train. Let me just Hello, and welcome to episode 215 of the Zombie Train. I am Trainman, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so here I need to go grab the comment. I was just looking for it. This is on episode 196. Zombie Train, episode 196. While I get that, I will point out that, as always, if you want to... How come I can't find it now? If you want to see all of the everything, if you want to see what's going on in this video in real time, then go and check out the relevant episode of... Well, why is this only the first... Oh, it's not. The relevant episode of Under Construction, which I don't have the sort of, whatchamahoo's it? I don't have the name of it yet. I'm waiting to put it up. So anyways, also nukes, did someone use them, and where did you use nuclear power? If yes, for what? Now, let me say that we, the Zombie Train Incorporated, did not have much use for nuclear power. We did have a couple of generating plants which had managed to either continue operating under their automatic protocols, because they will do that, or that had shut themselves down automatically and we were able to bring online with minimal effort. Those, as well as wind, solar, and hydroelectric, were the easiest power sources that we had, for things that were already set up. Which were, which is good. We didn't have to... we had a lot of power capacity if we could get it to transmit, especially from the nuclear plants. So, once we got the grid in place, or, sort of up to a workable way, which, for the most part, it's not too hard, but we did sort of snip off a lot of extra draw. We ended up building these little, sort of switch stations where we could cut off sections from the grid, and we ended up having what you would not call a robust power system, so generators were on hand at most of the fairly populous settlements, or they were just assigned to not absolutely need electricity until we got it built back up, because first things first was, when we wanted to revitalize the power grid, it was see what sort of power stations we can bring online, and then make sure we're only giving power to places that need it. Because if we start just dumping power into the grid, it's going to go to a lot of things that were either left on or just don't matter anymore. Like traffic lights in towns that don't even have people in them anymore. But that was, the few nuclear plants that are in the U.S. that were not destroyed, because none of them, thankfully, went and melted down. They all had protocols built in to make sure that nothing like that would happen, even if there were no humans around, and some of them got shut down by the operators as well, while people were, on the day of the Great Panic or shortly thereafter. Okay, let me say this now. The biggest user of nuclear power was, that we had association with, of course, was the U.S. Navy at this time. And that's because, as fuel was scarce, they took their entire nuclear fleet and pooled it in the Pacific, pretty much. We were left on the East Coast with whatever we could scrounge up and a whole bunch of ships without fuel. It was annoying, to say the least. I've talked about my gripes with them before. But that's really just what we had to deal with, And they needed everything they had, which didn't need constant refueling. And nuclear carriers can go years and years and years without refueling. So it was a no-brainer for them to take the entire nuclear fleet. As well as, up to and including submarines. And, from submarines to aircraft carriers and everything in between. There weren't any ships built, of course, during this period. None of the no ships that were built with nuclear reactors. None of the power plants that were built were nuclear. Primarily wind, because it's really easy to build up wind power. You need it in droves in order to get anything really useful out of it. But as far as power goes, once you have it set up, it's fine. You can set it up pretty much anywhere. And it's very, very simple to put together. All you need is a motor and some blades. And like a big pole to hoist it onto. So you started seeing these little turbine farms sprouting up across all these, any cities that still had life in them. As well, you would see water wheels and makeshift dams and stuff like that for power. And not even necessarily for power, for mill equipment sometimes as well. There was when the power grid went out and went out for some time, there was some regression. And over the years, you see people sort of going back to what you can do without electricity, which is quite a lot, if you know how to use the resources that you have on hand. Obviously, we're using a steam locomotive on the zombie train, so that's just a hey, look at us, we're doing that, and it's a good example of exactly what you can do without electricity. Even though we did use electricity in no small way on the train, it's for the most part, we were steam powered, and even when you have steam making the electricity, there were a few times where you would see some steam-powered equipment for generating electricity or for generating power coming back into service. Some old coal plants, because we weren't going to dabble in natural gas or anything like that, that's for sure. Once we got a little bit more confident with our ability to get coal, we brought coal power back into the picture. But building a nuclear reactor was something that was really far out there. The thing was, though, if you think about being able to get resources, uranium is pretty low on the list in terms of, or is pretty high on the list in terms of difficulty in getting it. So while we did use nuclear power plants, we sort of sapped them dry. We didn't have a way to get reliable, we didn't have a way to reliably get large amounts of uranium that could be used in reactors. I don't think this really comes as a surprise to anybody, though. It certainly came as a surprise to nobody in the zombie train. In fact, I don't think it was ever even, It was ever seriously suggested as, what should we be doing? Uranium mine was not up there. The military did start, or did do their best to produce uranium, but they had other things to worry about, so they ended up starting to cut down on their fleet one bit at a time as ships started to run out of fuel. Again, that wasn't really ever a major concern, but there were some that were close to the end of their life, including the aircraft carrier Enterprise. That was one of the first ships to get taken out. But also the routine maintenance that you need to perform in a nuclear reactor meant that a lot of the ships, it was not so much a problem of running out of fuel, then it was more of a problem of not being able to do the proper maintenance on a nuclear reactor to make sure that it's safe and continually usable. So we watched a lot of these ships get mothballed. Until the Navy was able to get back on their feet a little bit. With our help, with many other things, including steel and oil and pretty much anything that we needed to rebuild anything. So metals like copper and tin and aluminum being pulled out of the ground, processed, or which was much more common, recycled from cities that were abandoned. So we did an awful lot of that. The raids okay, here's the thing. I've talked about raiding museums for steam engines and stuff like that. Obviously, when we didn't have the farming capability, which that was something that bounced back fairly quickly because it's not hard to teach somebody to farm. Well, yeah, it's not hard to teach somebody to farm. It's hard to get them to do it reliably and do it well. But humans have been farmers for, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. It's, I wouldn't say it's second nature to us, but it's something that just about every human can figure out, and, it's just something that every human can do if pointed in the right direction and said, hey, do this. So, anyways. But before farming got up to speed, we'd, and when we were running out of steam engines to raid, it was raid towns for canned goods, go through markets and stuff like that for anything that's not spoiled, which that could be dangerous in some cases. Like, you stayed away from supermarkets, especially in the early days, because they basically turned into biochemical bombs in terms of disease, because you'd have huge stocks of stuff molding and going bad, and that you just didn't want to be around there. After time passed, it might have been safe to go back, but it was typically just find just canned things. So that's that. And then it developed, of course. So you went from, obviously, in this post-economy days, there is no scrap value. So you didn't have to worry about people going and pulling the copper out of walls. Until we did, because we needed copper. It's much easier to basically tear down a town that nobody's using than it is to start up a mine and pull the stuff out of the ground. And, separate the metal from the ore, etc., etc. And so, while this wasn't done as much with steel, because in some cases we just needed steel, and iron is not too hard to come by, and coal we were getting anyways. What I guess I would call a more niche metal, again like copper, we sort of just went and teared stuff apart for. And that's, there's really nothing else to it. And then a lot of times we traded this stuff to the military in exchange for favors or in exchange for people, manpower, whatever. And it worked out pretty well because they got their ships and we got our manpower and whatever else we needed. Sometimes they tried to grant us, when they could, military grade hardware like certain radios and weapons and what am I trying to think of, like just tracking devices and technology and stuff like that, so we could keep an eye on where zombies were and where we expected them to be. We got access to satellite networks where we could use the cameras on satellites to get satellite imagery. This is in no small part thanks to the valiant efforts of the astronauts that stayed on the ISS during this entire time. And because they had a capsule they would go around in and boost satellites back into orbit as their orbits began to decay. Because all of the satellites around Earth, except for the geostationary ones, are in a position where they're probably going to decay and fall into the atmosphere, if not given boosts, at least with their internal software. Like, the thing with the satellites is, it's not like somebody has to fly out there and give them back boosts, and give them boosts, but they need to be commanded to give themselves little boosts. And it was not something that even the ISS astronauts could handle doing without the help of, like, Houston, which they didn't have. And so they ended up doing it manually in a lot of cases. I don't know. There were 3 astronauts up there, I believe. All of them survived, came back to Earth, and were basically bedridden for the rest of their lives because of the atrophy from staying in zero-G for that long. But anyways, that was a not very nuclear talk, but that's sort of what it was. We didn't get hands-on with them most of the time. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week. Trainman out.